brought to you by State Bank of India.
Completely historic day in cricket history at the ICC World Cup 11 2011. India and England have tied this match. 338 is what India put up with. Sachin Tendulkar blasting 120 runs of 115 balls. The English resistance was strong with Andrew Strauss, the captain, scoring 158. It looked like this match was out of reach for the Indians. It just wouldn't seem fair. And it turned out to be a tie. I'm Mihir, Mankad. I have here with me in the studio on our show house that our cricket experts, former cricketer Rajendra Ramanathan and sports journalist Mr. Harpal Singh Bedi. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
A special day for Indian cricket, special day for sport. What an amazing match. 338 put up by the Indians. It looked like this match should have been out of reach. Andrew Strauss, amazing batting. 281 for 2 in the 43rd over. And the match ends in a tie. Mr. Amarnath, your thoughts?
Well, I think they planned their innings very well, especially England if you're talking about chasing a mammoth total of 339. It's not the easiest of total you can chase. But the way they progressed, they didn't go for any fancy shots. They just played out overs according to the plan. They looked at about 6 to 7 runs per over. That is the way they were batting. But full credit to the English captain. He played run a ball right throughout the inning. And that was the reason they could stitch up a partnership for the first wicket, 60 odd runs, and then came the big partnership with Ian Bell. And that really changed the complexion of the game.
Well, it sure did. 158 runs by the English skipper Andy Strauss off just 145 balls, 18 fours. The Chinnaswamy Stadium in Bangalore was silenced. You're not used to seeing an Indian stadium like this. They cheered for when Sachin Tendulkar made his 100. They were silenced, and then all of a sudden, in a space of 7 overs, both teams scored 338 runs. Despite Strauss's 158, the highlight of today, Mr. Bedi, has to be Sachin Tendulkar. 120 runs, his 47th ODI 100. He's going for 100 between ODIs and Test cricket. What do you have to say about this innings?
He's not getting swayed by patriotism. I think the match, if it has to be discussed in this toss, in the conditions he scored, there was not much pressure on Sachin. Given the shift on the pitch where he batted, he knew everything. And given the conditions his toss was batting, I think it was toss game. And you can say both the teams stats victory or draw or split point from the jaws of defeat. So nobody expected England to really back so strongly. And nobody expected India to come back so strongly. So I think it was fair, quite justice. I think the way it has gone down. But to say that it belonged to Sachin, it depends on you. But I think they belong to Strauss.
Alright, well, I'll give you that. I'll tell you, I was swayed a little bit by the patriotism. Just seeing how Sachin paced that innings initially in the match. You know, when Sehwag was firing the fours, he had a composed innings. Then he got on with Gambhir. He started attacking and played an amazing match. But yes, let's talk a little bit about Andy Strauss, 33 years old. He's leading the side after Kevin Peterson decided to resign after a controversial time in English cricket, came back strong in the first match again, impressed. And if you talk about this innings, we've seen scores of 175 before in the World Cup, but would you say, Mr. Amarnath, this has to go down as one of the finest innings that World Cup cricket has seen?
I think it was very calculative inning, because under the circumstances, he has to be given the credit, because when you're chasing, as I said before, a big total, you need one big inning, and it has come from the English skipper himself. Because he was the rallying point, he was the one around which partnerships were built. And he kept the pressure, he kept the momentum. And once you do that, the fielding side is always under pressure, and he would be turning a number of deliveries, good deliveries into scoring shots, and that shows a lot about his ability of putting pressure on the bowlers.
Well, indeed. I mean, if there was a case study of good batting, if this match could be recorded, as you said, it was a very calculated, a composed innings. This should go down as one of the best played. Let's start at the beginning of the match. There is a lot to discuss. 2 centuries, 1 on each side, a tied match, lots of runs, lots of wickets. Let's start with the Indian innings. The context, England going into this match had faced defeat at the hands of India 11 out of the past 12 times that they had played in away matches. The pressure was on England. Stuart Broad, a big key for England, was ruled out of the match with injury, adding to the country's woes. But again, England had a run of successes, especially in T20 World Cup. They were the champions. They came into the match. This would have been the highest chase in World Cup history. It turned out to be a tie. Let's talk about that Indian batting this day. Sehwag and Sachin Tendulkar coming out. And what we saw in the first few was Virendra Sehwag. I'm not sure if you would say this would be his best innings. He actually flashed a lot of shots and was lucky to get the score that he did, after which he went out.
First over he survived. He should have been out. But anyway, come to think of Tendulkar, when you were talking of Tendulkar, he's a great batsman. No, when you are comparing Tendulkar's toss, there is no comparison. It is like comparing Muthaiya Muralidharan and Afridi. Afridi clicked yesterday, but there is no comparison. Same way, everybody expected Tendulkar to score, and he scored. And he reminded of Tendulkar of yore, when he was young, the way he flawless batting. But Strauss, if you come to compare with Strauss, Strauss played the inning, as Rajendra rightly said, he scripted the way England batting went. Tendulkar, everybody expected. And he is a role model. He still told other people how to bat in this condition. And 120 of 150 balls, 10 4 and 5 sixes, massive sixes. People expect Sehwag or Mihir to score sixes. The way Tendulkar blasted sixes, it is an amazing story of a greatest batsman.
Well, 120 runs, and 70 runs off those 120 came off 4s and 6s. In fact, 5 6s, 30 runs just off 6s. Composed innings, 115 balls. In fact, again, he said his 47th ODI century and 6th century in 6 consecutive World Cups. Just take a look at Sachin Tendulkar's explosive 6 there at Nottingham Swan, one of the world's best off-spinners, for huge 6s like this in front of a packed Indian crowd. Just an amazing performance. Sachin Tendulkar, 120. Big partnership with Gautam Gambhir. A solid opening with Virendra Sehwag, 115 balls, as you said, 10 4s, 5 6s, strike rate of 105. What can you say about Sachin Tendulkar? Mr. Amarnath, 37 years old, 6 World Cups and counting. The man was run out in the last match against Bangladesh when Viru Sehwag actually ended up scoring 175, came back 120 this innings. If you just talk about the quality of this innings, what are some of the sparks that you saw?
A different Tendulkar, absolutely different, because he knew, having lost Sehwag early on, he's the key to Indian plan, because he is one, if he stays there for 20 odd overs, the runs will be put on the board. Sachin takes time, and probably his role has been in the team now is that he should play all 50 overs. And if India loses wicket, they should lose wicket from one end, not from both ends. He'll keep the end block and get those runs. But the best part of his inning has been he built that inning. He waited for the loose delivery, and once he get his eyes settled, there was no looking back. And those massive sixes, I've never seen him hitting so many sixes, especially from outside the off stump. 2 6s in 1 over of Swan, especially one at long one and other at mid wicket. Those are not the easiest of shots to play.
Well, indeed, when a player reinvents himself at this age and has that hunger to go for his 4700, you have to give hats off for him. Let's talk a little bit about that formidable batting lineup of India. You have Viru Sehwag as well as Sachin Tendulkar that would probably make an all-time Indian 11 in one-day cricket. Of course, Sachin Tendulkar, also Sehwag. Then you've got Gautam Gambhir, who's also been in sublime form over the past 3-4 years. 1, 2, 3 strong. Mr. Bedi, there's a lot of firepower still at 4, 5, 6. You talk about Yuvraj Singh, you talk about Mahendra Singh Dhoni, of course Virat Kohli. Do you feel that part of the reason that this firepower is not kicking off as much as it could is because they're just 2 strong performers there, and the chances that they do get, although we did see a half century from Yuvraj today, but when the chances come, they probably don't get enough overs to really show the fine form that they're in.
No, you're right. But anyway, overall, India's performance was awesome batting. Come to think of it, 5 305 in 46 overs. What do you expect it more than? But question is that India has to score every time 300, more than 300. It looks like the given Indian bowling is so bad. 377. No, it is, one should not laugh at 270. We scored 377 and could not bowl out Bangladesh. Then people said it is possible. Here on this pitch here, we scored 338 and everybody. It was even said that those who thought that India will not win, as they had to have their head checked, but then India struggled to survive. And this was very much, every time, if India bats first, you don't expect India to score 300 or 400 runs, or don't expect Sehwag or Tendulkar or Gambhir to blink. There is a lot of averages also. You can get even the strongest side also, subject to that. So something you have to do. Yesterday we were talking about India bowling grey area, and that is right, is the grey area of fielding. So somewhere apart from what you have talked about batting awesome. There is no doubt 338, but more you cannot score every than 300 or 300. In 2 matches you have scored more than 700 runs. But it is bowling. And it is the field.
Well, indeed, that's going to be the big question mark and the point we discuss in just a bit. India's bowling. Do we need a fifth bowler? Srishant, who can do the magic? But right before that, let's also appreciate the innings played by Gautam Gambhir. He came in at a time where Virendra Sehwag got out early, quite a bit of pressure on him, and he played a pretty stalwart innings at 51 runs, 61 balls, well paced with a master blaster, strike rate of 83. Gave India the start, the dream start that it wanted. At one point, India were 180 for 130 overs. It was set for a big score. Gautam Gambhir did his part. Mr. Amarnath, let's ask you one thing. At one point, when the Indian, these top 3 batsmen were just flowing, and then Yuvraj Singh came on also and started playing his fours, the thought was that they could get to 370 again. Of course, if you analyze the last part of the Indian innings, 7 wickets were lost in the space of 25 balls. Do you think that there was perhaps, again in the second game running, a failure to capitalize on the last 10-15 overs?
See, we have to understand once the top order batsman consumes far too many deliveries. They've got runs against the thing, no doubt about it, because you will only survive and get runs if you are going to stay there in the middle. But you leave very little scope to get runs for the lower order batsmen because not many overs are left. And at that time, when you walk in, the expectations are that runs will be scored quickly and you will go for the big shots. And once you go for the big shot, the chances are that you lose wicket. But you have to give credit to Bresman. He bowled so well, he bowled within the wickets, and he just kept on picking up wickets. And that was the reason the lower order batsmen just couldn't get those runs.
Indeed. Well, you mentioned a big point about the bowler from England who made the difference, taking up 5 wickets. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the chink in the Indian armour, which could be their bowling. But right after this short break, stay with us here on How's That?
By the time you have finished your tea, your tax is paid. That's SBI e-tax for you. Easy, convenient, and secure. SBI e-tax. Now just a click away.
भाई साहब, यहाँ पास में कोई SBI की ब्रांच है?
SBI का ब्रांच है आपके जेब में।
हाँ? यहाँ पास में SBI की कोई ब्रांच है?
आपकी जेब में तो है। SBI ढूंढते हैं।
क्यों जेब में नहीं है?
ये रहा SBI का ब्रांच।
स्टेट बैंक फ्रीडम यानी SBI की मोबाइल बैंकिंग जो दे आपको बैंकिंग की हर सुविधा कहीं भी कभी भी।
तो हुआ ना SBI का ब्रांच आपकी जेब में?
Well, welcome back. You're watching How's That on a historic day of cricket. India and England have tied their ICC World Cup match. This was not expected when India put up 338 runs on the board. But the English gritty side, led by skipper Andy Strauss, who put in 158 amazing runs, this match came to a tie. We were talking about the Indian batting. Let's talk a little bit about what we saw in the English bowling today. First of all, James Anderson, England's top bowler, #1 bowler, bowled 9.5 overs and was slammed for 91 runs. This is actually the record for the most number of runs given by an English bowler in World Cup history. But then Tim Bresnan, now a little underestimated, known for his reverse swing as well as heavy balls and cutters, bowled an amazing spell, which is the best spell by an English seamer in World Cup history. 10 overs, 48 runs for 5 wickets. Mr. Vedi, we were talking about Bresnan a little earlier. How solid was this bowling performance to contain India?
Well, I have my doubts. 4 wickets for 305 runs, 46 overs gone, remaining 4 overs. Now what do you expect batsmen to do? As Rajendra rightly said, the top order had consumed the bowling, and other people had to come and hit. For 4 overs, what can we expect? At 4 overs, we come to that, they scored 28 runs. So their batsman scoring, one can say he did a good job, but he was expected any bowler could have done that. The condition was there that the inning had been built up so solidly, 305 runs in 46 overs. Remaining 4 overs, other people had to come and hit, and it was hit and run, and you didn't get out.
Well, I'll give you that. I agree that there were only few overs left, but the type of batsman and the type of wickets that he took, the reverse swing that he bowled was quite exceptional. Harbhajan Singh, LBW of a brilliant ball. Virat Kohli bowled, clean bowled for a score of 8. Also, Yusuf Pathan, an important wicket, had him caught off Swan for a score of 14 when Yusuf was just about to get going. We had to give it up a little bit though for this play. Of course, there were 2 run-outs that led to the Indian collapse. But Mr. Amarnath, your quick thoughts on Bresson and his potential going ahead?
I think he did a marvelous job. There is no doubt about it. You cannot take the credit from any bowler because it's very difficult for a bowler to pick up 5 wickets in any form of the game. But yes, the Indians, I think, didn't read him well at the dying moments of the innings because they played to the wrong deliveries. And he mixed up his pace. He bowled a number of good deliveries in the form of Yorkers and regularly picked up the wickets. And once you start doing that, not only you bowl a dot ball, you also get a wicket, and that puts an extra pressure on the batting side up. And continuously he did that, and that's the reason at one stage what looked like India would get about 350. They just finished up 12 runs short of it.
Well, like we said, 7 wickets fell in the space of 25 balls. At least 4 of those 7 wickets were by Mr. Bresnan, and also there were a couple of run-outs that came in towards the last over. So a score of 338, as you said, India looked to 350, 370 potentially, but they were contained for 338, and there was a little bit of a sigh of relief that India saw. Okay, Yuvraj Singh and Mahendra Singh Dhoni, 2 key performers. Yuvraj Singh, lot of pressure on him. Remember, there are 2 stalwart batsmen waiting in the ranks. You have Suresh Raina and Rohit Sharma, both very solid players looking for that spot, but today, Yuvraj Singh silenced the critics. 58 runs, 50 balls, 9 fours.
There is no other alternative. You can't use the word silence critic because it is a duty score. See, this is not your gadget that I speak for my. You are supposed to do this one. And not critics are not just because of your failure. They don't criticize you. You are expected to score runs. And when you do not expect, you don't score, people say why you do not score. And as you rightly pointed out, there are a lot of people waiting for the chance. So he applies on the chance. He is a good player. He is a good all-rounder. And I think, not taking a credit from Bresnan 5 wickets, if India had not scored 305 runs at that stage, it would have been difficult for him because other batsmen tended to be over-competition. That if 305 runs, we can also score. There was no fear at that stage when Bresnan took part in batting. But as far as Yuvraj's potential is concerned, everybody knew that he had to click sometime. If he doesn't click, you cannot keep him in the side because there are too many people waiting outside on the bench.
Indeed. Yuvraj Singh played a critical innings. In fact, he had an important partnership with Dhoni. Sachin Tendulkar and Gautam Gambhir had paired up 134 runs, but there was an important partnership that came in the middle order that provided India that strength. Yuvraj Singh, 58 runs of 50 balls, and Mahendra Singh Dhoni, 31 runs of 25 balls. Some of the stroke play that we saw amongst these 2 willow wielders that might be the best in the world on their day was quite impressive and heartening for India. Unfortunately, due to a collapse at the very end, India failed to put up 350, 370, but 338, a consecutive 330 plus score at the World Cup. A very solid performance. Yuvraj Singh and Mahendra Singh Dhoni added a partnership of 69 runs off 48 balls that got the score to 338. So, India put on 338 runs. What had got to be the feeling in the English locker room at that point?
I think they must have thought probably they have missed the bus. But it was not to be. Because once a captain decides to take charge and decides to lead from front and also shows the way, because the way he batted in the middle, that would have given a lot of confidence to the incoming batsman. And once you start feeling there's no fear in the mind of any batsman, it's very difficult to dislodge them. And you'll have to give credit to the English team, because they knew which is the weakest link in Indian bowling. Indian bowlers were there, the 4 regular bowlers, and rest we have seen in the past also. Dhoni has been experimenting with non-regular bowlers, and they knew the wicket is such, if they don't bowl line and length, there's always a chance of picking runs. And they looked at Yuvraj was one of the weakest link today, because he gave away too many runs. But surprising part was, Virendra Sehwag was not even used for 1 over. He could have been used in between, but at the same time, what we saw, Mahendra Singh Dhoni shuffling his bowlers far too many times. Because once Chawla was bowling line and lane, troubling the batsman, he would have bowled extra 1 or 2 overs. That would have put more pressure on the batsman. Because he almost got a wicket of Ian Bell. And there was a chance when he played a cross-shotted the sweep shot, which was to a delivery which just pitched outside the off stump, and he got a benefit of doubt. So according to the rule, yes, he was not out. But it was a very close shave for England. Had India got the wicket at that stage, I don't think so England would have reached even 300 runs.
Well, yeah, that's a big question. In fact, there was a lot of firepower with Collingwood and Gopara to come, but in those pressure situations, could England have come close to tying the score? Let's talk a little bit about that Indian bowling that we said could be a little chink that in India's armour. Zahir Khan though, 64 runs for 10 overs. We don't see him going for that many overs, and his first spell was extremely expensive. Piyush Chawla that you mentioned perhaps bowled the most effective spell for India. He went for 71 runs and took 2 wickets. But talk about effectiveness of its bowling. Mr. Bedi, before we go to the critique of it, how about Piyush Chawla's performance today?
He got 2 wickets, but something empty, and if he had got the best wicket, then that would have changed it. But they were different parts. Overall, if you see the bowling, it has not been impressive. We managed to tie the match. Thanks to because of some recklessness, some nervousness on part of the English batsmen. Otherwise, it batting needs to be, and like Rajendra said rightly, what happened to Sehwag and what happened to Tendulkar? It's a golden hour. So it's a crucial moment, you have to say. And too much of experimentation. I think my own feeling is that Dhoni is reading too much of newspaper. Because if you start reading and start taking media seriously, everybody is praising Dhoni that nothing is going wrong with his captaincy. Whatever he does, that's it. So somewhere you tend to get carried away with this experiment. Now today is another chance that Sehwag should have been given 1 or 2 overs, or Tendulkar should have been given 1 or 2 overs, where we have seen Tendulkar has been able to get a breakthrough, or even Sehwag. That experiment was not there today.
Well, indeed, here the big question for India is, does the country need a 5th specialist bowler? We'll get to that question. We'll analyze the English batting that was stupendous. But right after this break, stay with us here on How's That?
भाई साहब, यहाँ पास में कोई SBI की ब्रांच है?
SBI का ब्रांच आपके जेब में। हाँ?
यहाँ पास में SBI की कोई ब्रांच है?
आपकी जेब में तो है। SBI ढूंढते हैं।
क्यों जेब में नहीं है?
ये रहा SBI का ब्रांच।
स्टेट बैंक फ्रीडम यानी SBI की मोबाइल बैंकिंग जो दे आपको बैंकिंग की हर सुविधा कहीं भी कभी भी।
तो हुआ ना SBI का ब्रांच आपकी जेब में, हाँ?
जब तक आप अपनी चाय खत्म करेंगे, आपके टैक्स का भुगतान हो चुका होगा। ये है SBI ई-टैक्स आपके लिए आसान, सुविधाजनक और सुरक्षित। SBI ई-टैक्स अब बस एक क्लिक की दूरी पर।
Hello, welcome back. You're watching How's That? Our analysis and discussion after the ICC World Cup matches. Today was an amazing match. I kept saying this, I'll say it again. India and England tied. Both countries scored 338 runs. The best batsmen of both countries got centuries. We were talking about the Indian bowling right before the break. Let's get back to the question. Big question. Does India need to seriously think about a 5th serious bowler leaving out one of its batsmen?
I think looking at the situation, looking at the record, looking at what's happened today, definitely you want your 5 good bowlers to bowl. But at the same time, that means you'll be losing one batsman. Maybe you can always try this experiment against a weaker side and see how it works out. Because number of overs which we have seen, Yuvraj coming out with 7 overs and Pathan chipping in 3 overs, that takes care of 10 overs probably. This has been the planning of the Indian camp. They will use 4 bowlers and then try and use up next 10 overs between a couple of players. But at times it works and at times it doesn't work. And today was the day when nothing was working except probably a lot of prayers of the people in the stadium must have done wonders to Indian performance.
Indeed. We talked about the crowd and the way they got into it with Tendulkar and then the way they were silenced when Strauss unleashed his strokes and then came right back. Yuvraj and Pathan went for 67 runs for their 10 overs. Yusuf Pathan actually perhaps feeling not used as much as he could be. A pretty good bowler, had opened actually bowling sometimes for Baroda in the past. not used. When we talk about the fifth bowler that India could invest in, who should they go for? Ashwin or Srisant?
First of all, if they are going for fifth bowler, they will be dropping one batsman. And India is winning because of batting. The problem is you are taking a big gamble. You have got 2 matches because of batting, because you have crossed 300 runs. Now if you drop one batsman, bring in one bowler, and you are not very sure that bowler will be successful or not, you are depriving the batsman. I think that will be a big gamble, and I don't know whether they will be able to take the gamble, because Yusuf Pathan is there, Yuvraj is there, Sehwag is there, and Sachin Tendulkar is there. Among them, if they bowl 2 hours each, or 3 hours and 2 hours, they take care of 10 hours. But if you are bringing a specialized bowler, which looks very, which case can be built up, but then you are dropping the batsman. And you are dropping batsman already, you are not sure what will happen.
Well, Mr. Bedi, the thought is in the last 2 games, India hasn't needed 7 batsmen. It's their top 2 or 3 batsmen that have posted most of the scores, and then India has also given away a lot of runs. 290 against Bangladesh, 340 almost against England has got to raise some eyebrows about the bowling. But a good point, who do you drop when you have such a stacked batting lineup? Who can you drop? Yusuf Pathan, too useful, too effective in crunch times to drop at this stage. It remains to be seen what India does for future matches. But let's get to what was again perhaps the highlight of today. Even as you said, eclipsing Sachin Tendulkar's 120.
No, I'm not saying it. I said, I do not get carried away.
Oh, sure.
Tendulkar, but Rajendra thinks that 6 is the score will put any youngster to shame. The amount, the way he played, it reminded people of Tendulkar Viewer, and those people who question marking, they will question mark how long he's going to play. No, they don't seem to be stopping. And why should he stop? He's playing like a god. Having said that, there is no doubt about his caliber. Talking about Andrew Strauss, because nobody gave him a job. The Tendulkar century has not come as surprise. Strauss 5 buck has come as a surprise.
Well, indeed, but he played a very solid knock in the first play. In fact, he was the reason why England escaped against Netherlands and Ryan ten Doeschate, who had an amazing performance. Strauss gave them a great start. Of course, Sachin Tendulkar expected to bring in the big scores in the World Cup, but Andy Strauss, the skipper of an English side who always been underperforming at the World Cup. They've actually hosted it 3 times, never won the World Cup. Coming into the special match against a country of 1 billion cheering for Tendulkar. The first man in there facing Zaire Khan, 340 runs to put on the board, scored 158 runs of 145 balls. Mr. Amarnath, a little more about this innings and also the partnership that he had with Ian Bell, with the strokes that we see on the screen right now.
I think you have to learn a lot of things from him. We have seen bowlers using the crease, but in this case we have seen him using the crease, because he read the line so well, he read the length so well, and he would play a big shot and then he would try and shuffle in within the crease and then play an amazing shot and pick up boundaries with ease. He didn't go for big shots, in the sense he didn't go for too many airy shots, he just picked 1 6 and the rest was everything on the ground, and that was the hallmark of his batting. And Sachin had a couple of batsmen who got runs from the other end. Mihir was one, and then Yuvraj came. But in case of England, it was solitary performance by the English captain, except for half a century by Ian Bell. Nothing coming from anybody else. So he was getting the bulk of runs. That is why this performance is definitely special for England.
Well, talk about a leader leading from the front. Pressure of captaincy, number 1 batsman leading for the front, 158. He could have gone for the highest score in World Cup cricket until a beautiful ball from Zaire Khan caught in LBW. But talk about the partnership, perhaps the key partnership of this game. Andrew Strauss, Ian Bell. How good is Ian Bell? 69 runs, 71 balls, coming again at a time where there is pressure. The second wicket had fallen. Ian Bell, again, some of the shots that he plays, his selection, the way he came out of the crease, excellent. Mr. Bedi, your thoughts on this batsman for England?
I have my own theory. India takes their opponents very lightly. That's a big problem. And they go by what the newspapers say. See, we have beaten England so badly, rather sadly. So we don't take, this happened to us in 2007 World Cup, and we never took Bangladesh seriously, we never took Sri Lanka seriously. Here also, the problem is now team.
69 runs, 71 balls, four fours coming at a difficult time. This performance.
97.1 and scoring. And this is the performance, and it shows the character of that situation. But again, he was about to score, given our bowling, and overconfidence. Sometimes I think, Rajendra may not agree with you, we tend to take opponents for granted. Such a hype is being built, then you dismiss the team. Suppose if